I'm going to talk today about the housing plight of refugees. We've mentioned the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, which include the world's best plans to end poverty and hunger, ensure good health and well-being, quality education, and gender equality, to name but a few. But when it comes to housing refugees, especially in the urban landscape, the world is failing to keep the UN's promise to leave no one behind. There are many factors that contribute to this failure, but xenophobia, lack of political will, and an inability to enforce laws are contributing factors. Furthermore, even though all religions convey messages of charity, compassion, and care that extend to refugees, the current anti-immigration narrative and xenophobia towards foreign nationals often come from right-wing Christian religious groups across the globe. It is ironic that the formal humanitarian systems that developed in the 19th and 20th centuries were informed by these cultural and religious traditions. So in my essay, I briefly describe the link between religion and the development of Western humanitarianism. But for the purpose of my oral presentation, I would like to focus on a South African case where hundreds of asylum seekers and refugees, mainly from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or the DRC, started to camp out in protest on the public sidewalk in front of the offices of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or the UNHCR, in Pretoria. This was in October 2019 and followed deadly xenophobic attacks, which it was led by locals against foreign nationals. The global consensus is that refugees should be integrated in the host country's existing urban fabric and society. Their progression should be from emergency shelters and tent camps to full integration into society. But these refugees demanded to be moved to the safety of camps for protection and to then either be repatriated to their home country or relocated to safer countries. The sidewalks are public spaces that belong to the local municipality, but municipal officials claimed that the plight of the refugees was beyond their jurisdiction and that the Department of Home Affairs, the DHA, or the UNHCR should resolve the matter. The UNHCR told the demonstrators that it was not able to resettle or relocate them, since resettlement is a process that requires a third country to agree to admit the refugees and give them permanent residence. The protesters pitched domed tents on the sidewalk, and some residents and religious groups provided them with food and blankets. But two residents' associations went to court to have them removed from the upmarket neighborhood. The refugees were ordered to disperse and vacate the affected area within 3 days. Fearing forceful eviction, they made their way inside the UNHCR to demand protection. However, this only led to trespassing charges being pressed against them. And in November 2019, the South African Police Service, clad in riot gear, violently evicted about 700 refugees using water cannons and pepper spray. Hundreds, including women and children, were arrested and hundreds more were detained at the notorious Lindela Repatriation Center until the DHA could verify their immigration status and process them accordingly. Lindela has proved to be the worst kind of accommodation for refugees. It became synonymous with abuse, corruption, and systematic denial of basic rights, and riots, assaults, and deaths have been common. Management of the facility was outsourced to a private company, Busasa, that wanted to make as much money as possible from the DHA. They were paid per person per day, so there was a financial incentive to increase the number of inmates. The red brick fortification used to be a miners' hostel compound, housing synonymous with apartheid before it was turned into a holding facility. Small rooms in the male dormitory had to accommodate 26 men in double bunk beds and an additional 11 on mattresses on the floor between the beds. Tensions flared with overcrowding and disease spread quickly. Many of the protesters returned to the sidewalk in 2022. This time they had to manage with makeshift shelters. A bus stop was converted by draping large plastic sheets over the openings on all sides, and sheets or pieces of cloth were hung from the boundary wall and fence, which doubled as a washing line. The temporary structures made pedestrian traffic impossible. The refugees were once more removed in 2023, and the UNHCR, in the meantime, has built a wall on the sidewalk to stop future illegal squatting. So this story tells us that because the protesters demanded to be relocated to camps where the UNHCR could protect them against xenophobic attacks led by locals, this goes against the global trend where most refugees choose not to live in camps, but in urban areas, because camps tend to turn into prisons and have unsanitary conditions. Traditional emergency refugee camps are designed to be temporary shelters, but their lifespans often exceed what was planned for. The oldest refugee camp is the Palestinian camp Daeshe, built in 1949 for 3,400 Palestinians who fled the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The UN built small shacks, but refugees did not want to live in those, so they built more durable structures. It now looks more like a permanent settlement than a temporary camp. One of the world's largest refugee camps is Kakuma in Kenya, where the average stay is 17 years. Architects Sandy Hillel and Alessandro Petti describe camps as paradigmatic representations of political failure, where refugees are stuck in time, waiting to be deported or relocated. Refugee camps should not exist. They represent a crime and a political failure. Camps are established with the intention to be demolished. They are meant to have no history and no future. They are meant to be forgotten. So to conclude, the UNHCR does have emergency shelter solutions and standards that you can view on their website. And architects have been collaborating with UN Habitat to develop new shelter models that are applicable in large-scale housing programs for refugees. But design shelters are not available to the refugee protesters if they are deemed to be illegal squatters. So the UNHCR does not offer recommendations on how cities and public space should serve refugees better. But without a formal housing policy, refugees are doomed to illegally occupy derelict or abandoned buildings in need of urban upgrade. In August 2023, a fire engulfed such a 5-story municipal-owned building in Johannesburg, killing at least 77 people, including 12 children. The building had been abandoned and hijacked by gangs who demanded rent from an estimated 400 squatters that included foreign nationals, economic migrants, and asylum seekers. Ultimately, it falls on humanitarian organizations and refugee advocates to provide asylum seekers and refugees with assistance and to facilitate the integration process. In South Africa, actions, investments, and activism to deal with homelessness come from non-profit, faith-based, and community-based organizations. So until architecture is seen as a human right, one that extends to refugees, the UN SDGs will remain unattainable. Thank you. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our webinar, and I can already see Christy's hand up. For those of you who are watching online, the articles, the link to the articles on the Canopy Forum has already been provided.